Hi there, folks. It's Nathan from the future here. Just wanted to give a little contents notice that while we don't get massively explicit about it, we do talk about adult themes in this, especially around monster erotica. So we wouldn't recommend this for younger viewers, and if it's just not your cup of tea, do feel free to give this video a miss. We've got plenty of other videos you might enjoy on our channel. That being said, despite what the layout says, Zoe's pronouns are they, them. Thank you very much. Enjoy the chat. Welcome back to this PrideCAF 12-hour live stream. Chris, what hour are we into now? We're in...
Hang on, I have a countdown timer on my phone that I set earlier on. We
We
have
have...
1 hour and 59 minutes to go.
Oh,
So we are at hour 10 of 12, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I can do maths.
Thank you to everyone who has joined us throughout the day. Thank you to everyone who has donated throughout the day. We did receive a donation during the break, so thank you, James. I know James from a long time ago, so thank you to him for the £50 donation. It means a lot. If you don't know, we're raising money for AKT, which is a LGBTQ homelessness, youth homelessness charity, which is nationwide. And we're hoping to reach £500. So we have 2 hours left. We still have a good, there's probably £130 left to raise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
We can do that. We can do that.
129 if you want to be real precise.
No, Mr. Maths here.
I mean, I added a pound.
But we're not here to talk about maths. We're here to talk about monsters. If you just had our D&D session, obviously we had like a plethora of monsters that me and Wolfgang were drawing and talking about, which did sort of go a little bit into the attraction of monsters as well. But with us today for this hour panel, we have Zoe. Welcome, Zoe. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit how, like, what you do as a creative, and what sort of projects you're currently working on at the moment?
So I kind of do quite a bit. I don't know when I sleep. So basically, I'm really into teratophilia, which is the fancy word for people who very, very, very much like monsters and find them very erotic and very interesting. I got into it through the anime and manga scene, and I ended up doing two masters, both specializing in niche areas of the Japanese porn industry. So my specialty is eroguru pornography in Japan and futanari. And so I was already pretty far down some rabbit holes. So it already seemed natural that I would discover tentacle hentai and go off in that direction. And it's kind of been like a lifelong passion. So now I decided that, you know what, I love all this stuff. I am going to try and pull off the UK's first monster romance and erotica convention. I host a monster romance erotica movie podcast. I write queer cosmic horror and monster boy erotica, and I draw a lot of it. So yeah, many many pies of like I like to research it, I like to think about it, I draw it, I live it, and I just love it.
Would you say you have many tentacles and many pies?
Yes, many tentacles and many cosmic pies.
It's interesting that you mentioned sort of hentai and sort of tentacle hentai as well. I remember like long ago watching sort of like late night Channel 4,
Yeah.
and they had like a conversation about hentai and animated pornography, and one of the things that came up was the fact that they had like this giant sort of woman that turned into a monster with many tentacles, and uh, for YouTube safety, like loving happened, um, and and they actually said that like the reason why they used that as the very first sort of like scene, we'll say, the very first scene was so that it made the male audience feel actually like less intimidated because it wasn't another man, which I found really fascinating, but also just like, what?
I mean, the entire Japanese porn industry is fascinating, and the whole idea is that it caters for absolutely every thought, desire, and everything. And no matter who's watching it, they kind of want the person watching it to feel safe and comfortable about how they're getting their erotic pleasure. It's why like yaoi is so popular amongst Japanese women, because it's a safe canvas for them to explore their sexuality on a body that isn't a female body. It's why like there is so many kind of like gender queer and alternate genders within anime directed at the male audience, because it's more ways to explore different ideas within them. And then also Japan has really, really strict censorship laws on what you can see, and because it cannot show anatomically correct genitalia, they have to get creative, which is why you had a lot of tentacles, drills, weird morphing things. It's why everyone gets nosebleeds, because you can't show ejaculation. And so their industry just got really creative with designing all of this stuff. And obviously, essentially, a lot of hentai is meant to, you know, be attractive to men, and the fantasy is the women enjoying themselves. So they want to see women having a good time, and if she's got tentacles, then she's having a good time.
Is that law? Is that canon? Like now, all women need to have tentacles to have a good time. Is that?
I mean, that might just be my personal ethos, but
sure. Okay,
I mean,
cool.
There's definitely been through more of just like being on the internet. I don't believe myself to be chronically online. I at least hope that I'm not chronically online. Or it might just be the areas which I frequent online. But I do see like a growing community of like monster romance. And I mean, like even now, like you see like TikToks and Instagram videos where people are talking like, oh, I'm reading my fairy erotica. We were even chatting to like an old friend of mine from secondary school who I didn't really believe would ever sort of be into that stuff. And she just went on and on and on about this fairy erotica that she reads. And that kind of blew my mind that like, do we believe that it's almost becoming mainstream? Like this.
It's really interesting, because obviously I have been in the fandom long enough to can quote you a load of films from the 80s that had monster erotica in them. And I watched like, you know, Galaxy of Terror not so long ago for my podcast, and the one that's got the very famous woman that has sex with a slug monster scene in it from like 1982. Like, so it was there. I mean, the 80s was great because also, I mean, video nasties and the Japanese ultraviolet movements were big. Cinema was experimental. There was a lot more monstrous and horror all coming out. There has been a line between horror and erotica for a very long time. You'll have all the people that came out of like Hellraiser going, oh my goodness, Pinhead. And that entire film is like, you know, love letters to like queer and monster erotica and outsider culture. So a lot of people kind of like came up through that scene. And then you get straight up monster romance films that people like Meridian Kiss of the Beast, which was 1991, which is literally like, it's not a great movie, but it's still worth watching, which is obviously it's like Beauty and the Beast, but she actually, you know, does it with the beast. There's sex scenes. So it's been around, but it kind of got forgotten. And then I'm seeing there's a massive resurgence of it. It's coming back. And I think part of it is, I mean, there's so many ways. Anime and manga becoming mainstream expose a lot more people to kind of like these images and these comics. Things like D&D came about that have such encyclopedias of like these gorgeous creature designs, and people have really like being able to live out fantasies as not just being humans has become bigger. Like movies have started kind of like realizing that people like something a little bit different. I mean, Shape of Water came out and everyone was like, oh my god, and I sat there going, well, that I love this movie, but these kind of films have existed for the last 20 years. I've been watching these movies, but it really propelled everything. And then when Venom came out, all of a sudden, everyone who was ever into a tentacle or a monster went, oh, hello. Oh, we're just in random, like, mainstream cinema now, because those films are not subtle about the eroticization of Venom or the nature of Venom and Eddie's, like, relationship. By the third film, they were pretty much going, and yes, this is a gay rom-com. And it made bank. And people are like going, oh, that's not going to sell. And it made bank. The advertising campaign and everything. He's like, the fact that he had to ride Venom horse, and he's like, oh my goodness, yeehaw, cowboy, ride me. And you're like, well, they're not being subtle about it anymore. And I just think it's just becoming more kind of acceptable. And there's that wonderful meme that goes around where there's like, oh, a guy will say, oh, look at the I would conventionally attractive woman, and then a woman will go, yeah, but, and show you, well, Venom and Pyramid Head, kind of going, yeah, but look at this. It's just, I think women are being more open with the fact that our tastes can be very varied, and people have been like, oh yeah, different things are sexy.
I know that this may or may not be true, but like it's just something appeared in my head. The YouTube games reporter, or sort of like videographer these days, James Stephanie Sterling, is a big fan of Pyramid Head for exactly probably those reasons, as
Yeah.
far as I'm aware. So yeah, it's out there.
Yeah, it's definitely getting more attention, and more people are just being. You find just normal, like, I don't know if you call them normal YouTubers, but some of the YouTubers that I watch for content, like I watch Shoe on Head just because I like a little bit of like political like commentary and stuff, and even she's brought up the like, yeah, but Pyramid Head, and I'm just like, it's getting there, it's getting more attention, and I do think a lot of it is thanks to the Venom film, because after that, suddenly it was just like really openly everywhere, and they went all in for the third one, and God bless them for it.
Wasn't Swamp Thing also kind of quite a bit of a love interest? There was like a
Well,
love
yeah.
story in Swamp Thing as well.
Well, something does have a love interest, like does have. I can't remember the name of the girlfriend, but it's in the comic books, it's in the TV series, like, yeah. So it's always been a bit around.
Yeah, I guess I can't remember the name of the film, but that Del Toro film, is it The
Shape of Water, yeah.
Shape of Water, that's it. Yeah, again, sort of like that whole, you know, romanticization of the creature that's there. And like when I heard people talking about it, like they were just like, oh, they thought, and it was very interesting how people were just quite giggly but quite excited about it at the same time. I believe that sort of may have
Yeah,
awoken some people.
Definitely pushed it to people kind of going, ooh. And I think, and it's great because the thing about monsters is they don't play by any human rules because they're monsters. So you can have whatever erotic fantasy, whatever kind of relationship you like, because they're not bound by any like heteronormative storytelling. They're automatically outside different, the ultimate bad boy, and everyone who thirsts over like werewolf films. I remember when Van Helsing came out and everyone was like, Hugh Jackman hot, but Hugh Jackman in werewolf mode hotter.
Yeah. I guess also because in a good majority, especially with sort of like monster films, like the monster is the villain, the monster is the bad guy in a good majority of them. And we know there is a massive history of the villain always being queer coded. So it just kind of makes sense for that two to sort of meld, and then also have that sort of like, but I guess in a way also that monster is sort of like there's that misunderstanding. Like the villain is not just like, if the villain is the monster, they're not just like that, haha, I am evil because I am evil and I want to do this. It's very much like a misunderstanding and being perceived as the evil entity when that may not necessarily be the case.
Yeah.
And I guess that can resonate a lot with queer people, where it's just like, I'm seen as bad. I've done nothing to be seen as bad besides from just be who I am. And I can understand why then that whole sort of like feeling towards those monsters and horror, as well as a side note, can really resonate with the queer community.
I think queer horror's massive. And just talking about that, if you look at like the original like Frankenstein film, like Frankenstein's monster was not a villain. Frankenstein was the villain for creating this poor misunderstood like entity and going, I'll just shove you out in the world without any like ways of being able to survive and understand human society. And obviously it made mistakes, but there was no one to guide. And I mean, and I think that film is a big film that has resonated with the like queer community, because you find out about yourself, you're thrust into the world, and people are like, well, you're not doing that right, therefore you are a monster. And you're like, well, just because I'm not doing the same as all of you people doesn't mean my version of living is wrong.
Mm.
And I think it's continuing to evolve. Another film that came out, I mean, I like to say recently, but sometimes my recently turns out to be 20 years old. Is when The Babadook came out.
Oh yeah.
Babadook became a massive queer icon after that movie, because it was all about the anxiety that lived in your closet. And yes, part of the film was about a single mother dealing with a child with autism and the stigma of that, and her mental health deteriorating and her not being able to help her child, and how society perceives the child, because a lot of people are not overly kind when they see children dysregulating because they are having a difficult time, and they're just like, oh, your child's being naughty. I'm like, actually there could be many reasons why that child like has dysregulated. Like, let's give a bit of compassion. So the film was partly for that reason, but also it was this creature that lived in the closet and then came out, and people was like, oh, this is a monster. And actually no, they befriended this monster and realized that it could be part of their like family, and it did understand their anxiety and their being different from what like at the time mainstream Australian society was saying was the norm. And yeah, Babadook ended up being like a huge queer icon for people, because I was like,
Mm.
that's it, that I'm in the closet, but actually I just want a family that understands me, and I don't need to conform to the rest of it, but because this family is not.
That's really interesting, because I've never actually seen The Babadook, and I do want to watch it. I've just never had a. It's just
It's a great film.
it's one of those
Good.
films that, and it's really interesting that you explain it like that, because I always thought The Babadook became like an LGBTQ icon was because of the meme that came out about it. When someone shared like a sort of Netflix recommendation, and it was just like, see these other films under LGBTQ themes, and it was just like, sort of like Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and other sort of LGBTQ things, and then the Babadook was in that list, and everyone just went, haha, Babadook is an LGBTQ icon, and that's when they rolled with that. But
Yeah.
actually hearing now the explanation, that kind of makes sense, because if queer people are watching it alongside with the other queer films, and the algorithm of Netflix is going to go, oh yeah, this is an LGBTQ film, because other people who watch LGBTQ films are also watching the Babadook and like the Babadook. So it's like, so in a way, kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it probably did start life as the meme, but when you actually watch it, it does make sense in the context of the story.
Yeah. And it may also be that just like, I think a lot of queer people like horror anyway. So
Yes. Yes.
I'm just trying to sort of when we first met you, Zoe, you put us onto a film. So we interviewed you for our podcast, our Rough Sketch podcast that we used to do
Oh
back in the
goodness,
day.
yes. We drew cactus people.
Yes, we drew cactus people. And you put us onto a film called, was it Gorman?
Psycho Gorman. I was going
Psycho
to bring that
Gorman.
up.
Yeah.
Oh, I still adore this movie. Yes, there is a queer icon in that film. I love it.
I mean,
The
everyone should adore that movie.
yeah,
Yes.
It's
it's
an
a great
adorable
film.
movie.
the whole line of where the little kid, like when she passes her magazine and she's just like, this is a magazine full of hunky men, and he just kind of goes like, I have no need for hunky men, and then he looks at it and goes, or do I? It's like the best line in the whole film.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it when I saw that film. Again, that film was out round about the time the first Venom film came out, and I was suddenly sitting there going, have all my movies suddenly just got gayer monsters in suddenly? Has someone just been like, hey Zoe, we're just going to slip you some titles? I'm like, who's been in my dreams? But yeah, because it was done as like this homage to kind of like Power Rangers and B movies and
Mm.
Mutronics and the Guyver and stuff, and it's part parody and part just horrendously violent splatterfest. And it's like, it's a genocidal alien who's like, yeah, but being controlled by, I don't know, this 12-year-old girl that's clearly a bit unhinged. But then there was just like ooh, do I? And then when the magazine, in the final battle, and the magazine gets ripped, and he's like, no, not my hunky boys. And I'm just like, oh, look at this genocidal alien. He's had his coming out moment, and it turns out he's into hunky boys. And it's great because the people who made that movie made a range of Valentine's Day cards based on it as well. And I'm just like, and I love it.
I wonder whether or not it's due to, it might be a generational thing where people of our age, sort of like in their 30s and their 40s now, and they're also the people who are making these films. They grew up on like Power Rangers and stuff like that, and we can't shy away from the fact that sort of like how camp those shows were, like how outrageous they were a little bit, and that might have even been more due to the way that when the Western producers sort of took the footage from sort of like from the East, like how they just made it bizarre, like they made it campy, like it's perfectly legitimate in a way, in sort of like in when you view it from like the way it was produced in Japan, but then you see it sort of like where Westerners have just sort of like cut it up and tried to put in fix, and it just suddenly becomes like immensely campy in a way. And I think like a lot of people actually went, because I think I know so many gay men who's obviously their favorite Power Ranger was the Pink Power Ranger. And, there's reasons for that, because she was the most, flamboyant of all of them, and almost non-apologetic as well, which I think like a lot of gay men just like really wanted to resonate with. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent.
No, that's okay. But no, it makes sense. I do think that anyone who was watching movies and TV in the 80s, 90s, and is now trying to bring their own works, you will see like there's kind of like, I mean, the whole nostalgia era has hit us hard, which is not a great thing. I'm like, okay, can we just put Jurassic Park down now, please, guys?
Yeah.
Like, there's going that like remaking everything, and then there's films like Psycho Gorman, which are homages and inspired by the stuff that we used to love, and like bringing it back and kind of going, oh, this is really interesting, or just seeing like new takes on stuff, like when the new She-Ra like animated series came out. At first I wasn't 100% sold on like the animation style, but I gave it a go, and as the story went on, I was like, I was into this. And then when Horde Prime turned up, I was just like, holy moly, did they have to make him look like that? Because I spent the rest of the thing going, I can't hate him. And I'm like, why is he so attractive? And but then I remember when I was young and I was watching Jason the Wheeled Warriors, and I loved Jason the Wheeled Warriors, but I always remember thinking like, I really like Sawboss. And it's like, wait, the giant weird pumpkin headed green alien thing that turns into a truck with a spinning blade. And I'm like, yeah. And then I thought about it. And also there was Venger from the D&D cartoons. He was really hot. Oh, I like him. And then I was like, oh, I remember Legend. Tim Curry in Legend. Oh,
Yes.
goodness.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
And then I went down this
Sorry.
entire rabbit hole of like, well, I wonder which is the sexiest Tim Curry. Is it Legend, The Darkness? Is it
Probably.
Hexus from Fern Gully? Like, or, is it
Is it
Frankenfurter? Or is it Pennywise?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my goodness. And I need to play a smash, marry, like kill, which I will do for my like convention. There is going to be the Tim Curry round, because there's bits like when you hear Hexus singing in Fern Gully, and he's all like suggestively touching himself and being like, yummy, I love being poisonous. Like, what are you meant to do with that? Are you meant to sit there and go, yeah, that's a totally straight sentient goo? And are you not meant to be like going, well, it's kind of hitting something? I mean, you just realize that the 80s was full of these like eroticized like villains, and now we're getting a new wave in which they're no longer being the villains. They're kind of starting to become like love interests, hence things like The Shape of Water, Spring, a beautiful film by Benson and Moorhead. And if you know me, obviously Cosmic Horror is one of my big things, and it's just like there are some beautiful, like gorgeous, like monster romance. There is the Lucasfilm that absolutely bombed, the animated film Strange Magic. Holy moly, that film is magical because the romance isn't, oh, she's a fairy princess and they're fighting the evil bog king from the dark fairies, and he was just the most gorgeous insect bog king creature ever. And I was like, the movie is good. Okay, slightly jukebox musical, but like it turns some of the ideas on its head about like who the romances should be between. And I just love that for the monster genre, and I feel more films are slightly going that way. I mean, I'm particularly lucky because I read a lot of manga, and manga's been going that way for ages, and there are titles of monster romances that are just so wonderful now. You've got things like Monster and the Beast, which is the main human is a 40-year-old adventurer, and he's off doing adventuring, and he's he describes himself as like, that just he'll romance absolutely everybody. Pansexual 40-year-old, doesn't want to settle down, just being like, woohoo. Meets this like big beast called Cavo in the woods, who's all like big old demonic form, and he's all like, oh no, I'm a big shy monster. And they go on an adventure together and fall in love. And it's just like, well, this is lovely. Thank you for these wonderful like stories. And so yeah, and the fact that some of these stuff is even being like printed in like outside of Japan, because before all my monster porn was just like hidden corners of the internet. Now it's like, oh, hello, W.H. Smiths. I seem to see Mad K on the shelf. Do you know what Mad K is about? Because that's pretty dark and grim, but thank you that it's just there on the shelf.
Yeah, I do always remember going into a library and seeing like the sort of graphic novel manga section, which was very close to obviously the kids section, and seeing like Berserk there, and you're just like, no, move that away.
It's just like, manga is for everybody, but in the way that it's for everybody, in the fact that it does have an age rating.
Yes.
Like, there is stuff for young people and there's stuff for older fans. And like one of the reasons I started trying to do TeratoCon is because the actual manga scene in the UK has evolved from when I started going to it like 30 odd years ago. And a lot of that 18 plus content has been taken out of it. Like before, used to be like, there used to be the yaoi room and the hentai room. You'd have late night panels. You would be able to you'd be able to buy the naughty stuff. You just ask, could I have the naughty stuff? And they'd bring out the naughty box for you. Like, yeah, and I mean, I pretty much ran yaoi panels for years and monster stuff, and like, I mean, I still do. Luckily at ManamiCon, because they're always like, yeah, you bring your darkness, it's okay.
Yeah.
But like a lot of the like more mainstream anime cons and the newer generations, it's been so sanitized, and I'm like, but like most anime, I would say is from about 15 up. So the fact that there's none of that content anymore, I kind of think, well, what about grown adults that are into this stuff who want to read like Urasaki Doji and Berserk, or have a conversation about it, but don't accidentally want a 10-year-old to go, oh, are you talking about Chainsaw Man? No, put that down. You should definitely not be reading Chainsaw Man. For a start, I don't think you're going to get that it's about the existential crisis of human like existence and the breakdown of the mind in like modern society. I think you're just being like, woohoo, he has a chainsaw on his head. But it's just like, no, I do think like adults kind of need some safe spaces back just to be able to enjoy some adult material without people going, oh no, how could you be into that? I'm like, because these genres have existed for a long time. It's not like, and it's not even like modern society. I'm pretty sure the Greeks were like, already writing about love affairs with minotaurs way before any of us were like, oh, I'm into minotaurs.
Maybe this is why Cthulhuism is usually set in the Victorian era, like that sort of Victorian England. Maybe there's some links in there somewhere. We have a little bit of feedback from our chat by the Moss Dimension, or aka Squid. As an East Asian who presented as a femme woman, I hope it's changed since I was a teen, because I was really put off manga and anime for decades. which kind of makes sense, really. I think that's kind of touching back on our conversation a bit earlier, because the chat has to catch up a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in a lucky place that I've been in the genre long enough that I'm well researched. I know what I can handle. I know my likes. I know how varied the genre is. The UK scene, like at first they brought across all like the shock titles. Then they brought because they're like, shock, and actually I quite like a lot of that. Um, they try and bring across anything that's like they think is going to get really mainstream or popular. Like whatever you see on the shelves, there is way more like interesting and nuanced and interesting anime and manga out there. It just doesn't get like shouted about.
Mm.
So like when people are talking about like say queer rep in anime and manga, people kind of go like yaoi and yuri. I'm like, no, that's not queer rep. That is a form of sexualization and titillation for certain
Mm.
reasons. If you want actual interesting queer rep, you read a manga like Wandering Sun about the two people in high school. The boy realizes that he actually wants to be a girl and so starts coming to school in a female school uniform, befriends a girl who actually wants to be a boy, so is wearing the boy, and the way the two of them are like treated differently. So the one that is biologically female but wants to be a boy, it's like, oh, you're so cool and daring, you're a great tomboy, wow. But the one that was born biologically male but puts on a female uniform, they're like, stop being a deviant, this is against school rules. And it's them trying to navigate their place as two trans children in Japanese school.
Mm.
And that's the kind of stuff that doesn't get shouted about all over the place.
Mm.
So while I get that a lot of people can be put off anime and manga because of fan service, violence, like it's got some, and that all exists, but that's not all of it. There are
Yeah.
wonderful, touching stories set in reality. There are wonderful, beautiful, high fantasy stories that has none of that tits and titillation stuff. It's really varied. It's just looking for it or finding people who know where to point you to something.
That's
Yeah.
the stuff that gets the news mostly because of like its extremities, really.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the extremities of what people point out and go, look at them, look at the deviants, look at what they love. And we're like, well, yes, but we're adults, so we can do what we want.
Whenever we've done sort of like a comic workshop and we bring like a pack of like comics for people to read, whether or not they're sort of independent or published, I find it really fascinating and really quite heartwarming that if we definitely know that there's like a gay cis man there, they'll normally gravitate to the manga my brother's husband, if you know that one.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know, it's written by a gay sort of manga artist, who's primarily known for more of his sort of pornography that he's drawn, his hentai in the past, but this is like one of his first like just into general sort of slice of life stories, and he wanted to make it sort of like about a gay man who was going through this issue. So it's seen from the brother's point of view, a Japanese man whose brother has died, and his his American husband comes over to Japan to spend time with the brother to get to know him more. And it's a really lovely little slice of life, sort of a cross between sort of like different countries, different cultures, but then also like his brother coming to terms with the fact that his dead brother was gay, and he had a husband, and now this husband sort of lives with them and his little girl, and sort of pushing down those boundaries of just like, this is a big Western man that's now living in my house, but he's actually very kind, he's very thoughtful, he's not a deviant. And I find that really fascinating, where then I do see like a Westerner who's not really gotten into manga, who has that perception of just manga being very much about just about sort of hentai tentacles, seeing that and actually going like, oh no, there's some really lovely there's some really lovely little stories that are sort of coming out there that are about sort of like gay experiences. So yeah, and I do apologize, Squid, about that. We'll continue to say cis instead of biological, because that's correct.
We're always ready to be corrected.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're always ready to be corrected. I think heading back, it's something you said earlier on, Zoe, as well, and I think it sort of relates back to what one of obviously the last conversation that we had was regarding more accessibility to these sort of monster genres, and I think with D&D as well, that a lot more people, and especially like a lot more queer people, are playing D&D now, and that, as you said, has a plethora of monsters in there, and it gives you that sort of safe space to not only sort of explore your sexuality, explore those feelings that you have, but then also explore like those potentially weird attractions that you have to, you know, things that are not humanoid or things that are not, you know, human in a way. I mean, I don't know sort of like your take on that, Zoe.
So, I mean, I don't play a lot of D&D. I have a 2-year-old, so my D&D days are behind me. But I do still try and keep up with some video gaming, like when he's asleep. Um, and I think there's a big appeal in being able to explore a canvas and be able to, like, this is why I like a good like character creator, and I think this is why like D&D can appeal, because you can create wonderful identities, wonderful like constructs, and live out ideas and fantasies that you just can't do in the real world. And I like that when I play. So I'm a Dragon Age person. Like I think that's the one game I kind of play on repeat every year. Um, and so I like being able to create something and explore a world and seeing like what different like performance I can get out of it. I mean, I'm very like, I'll champion Veilguard for some of Veilguard. Some of Veilguard I'm a bit like, yeah, I can see EA did a number on you, but I will give it kudos by the fact that it let me romance a lich.
Yeah.
And it's like, where is the like sexual fantasy and desire of romancing a skeleton? And I'm like, the skeleton was really hot. The skeleton had a really nice personality. Like, Emmerich was just this lovely dude, and he wanted to become a lich. And the game was like, cool, you can continue your romance and you can still bone in a coffin. And I was like, that's not a fantasy I'm going to be able to live in the real world. And like, nor do I want to in the real world, because that wouldn't be quite as exciting as it would in like a fantasy where I can just imagine what that experience can be. Just enjoy the fact that, and I think again with me, sometimes with monsters, I fall hard for personality.
Mm,
Like, if Emmerich wasn't just such a wonderful gentleman and such a lovely guy, I wouldn't have been so like, I'm so in love with you. Yes, let's continue our romance, even though you are now a lich. It's just like, you know, the personality shines through. And I think I like that, especially like in queer experiences, because personality means so much. Why should we all be like judging whether or not we're attracted to people based on totally what's on our outside, when we could be making wonderful, meaningful connections just
mm,
like, you know, with our minds? Which again is why I like cosmic horror, because it's all about like, that's so far beyond like human connection, because cosmic entities and eldritch abominations and things beyond the stars, they are not going to think or act in any way, shape or form like human, or fit any kind of box humanity would want to put
mm,
them in, because they're so completely out there. But then you just imagine, what would that romance look like? How would it romance you? Where could it take your mind? What would that pleasure feel like? Would the pleasure be so insane that it will send you, well, mental? And is it worth it? Because it's something you'll never get in normal society.
yeah. And I think that that adds into sort of like a thought that's just come into my mind of just like not having, and probably sort of speaks to the queer experience as well, like if you are in a way sort of fancying, lusting after something that you literally know as a fantasy that is never going to happen within sort of like ever in reality, that also, that kind of almost makes it safe. That makes it safe that this is a fantasy. I definitely know this is a fantasy and I can live in this fantasy, and I know it can be safe because I can control it the way I can. And then personality plays into that a lot more, because I think with people who may not necessarily be like heavily attracted to sort of like the physical forms of what you people, you know, I always found it very difficult when people would just be like, oh, what do you fancy about men, or what do you fancy about women? I'll be just like, I don't know, are they nice? Do they like me back? I don't know. You know, there are elements that I can say, like I can say I like nice eyes, I like people who are tall, but that's not saying that I don't like people who are smaller than me, because they might be really nice to me and I might find that very attractive. And I think when it comes to monsters, that people can then find that sort of safe space. And Squid just saying it earlier on, saying used to get the hots for anyone in a skeleton onesie. I can only ever think of the fact that like Sans from Undertale got #1 as like the Tumblr sexy man. And why did like not only like a skeleton, but a skeleton that was made to be like a tubby little man, like ultimate sexy man to a wider group of people. And some of it might have been like very much for the laugh of it all, but I also do think because of his personality that came off, that was the attraction to a lot of people. And like I think being able to be attracted to someone but not necessarily have to worry about their looks, I think is very secure and very safe for people, especially in a sort of fantasy setting.
Yeah, personality goes so far. Like, I mean, I'm a child of the 80s. I was one of those people that fancied Skeletor. So it's just like, but yeah, personality and a safe space. I think for all that monsters are the monsters, the villains, the things that we are meant to be scared of, when you can control your fantasy, you can play it out how you want. And it's like sometimes like when I'm watching like mainstream movies and there is a conventionally attractive male actor. Now my problem is, I mean, part of my like ASD spectrum is I'm very bad with like faces. So they all have brown hair and square faces. And some of them I really can't tell apart. And if you've got generic, I'm a man action hero with square face, I'm like, I'm I'm not. You see, like the superhero films, and I'm seeing them, and I'm kind of going, no, no. And then King Shark will come out, and I'll be like, that one, that one. I like that one. And it's just like, and yes, they've dumbed him down a bit for later movies, and I'm like, he's not that stupid. Not in some of the comics. And I was like, you know, he and John Constantine had a whole thing, and John Constantine is one of my favorite characters ever. So I'm like, if like Constantine can approve of King Shark, then so can I. So part of it is because what is presented to us is like, this is someone sexy. I'm like, I can just see a whole collection of blonde women. I can't distinguish some of their features. But you give me something that goes against that, or you give them a really strong personality, and I'm just like, yes, yes, I can root for you, I can understand you. And if it comes with like an element of like fear, it makes it more titillating. It makes it more like, oh yeah, I'm slightly like scared that you might eat me. And but at the same time, I'm like, I mean, Species is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just
Very early
like,
days.
that erotic fantasy is everything. I wanted to be Syl so badly. I thought, like, you know, it's like, oh my goodness, if I could be anything, I want to be Syl from Species. That would be my fantasy.
It makes me wonder if they did some of the dumbing down. No disrespect to Sly Stallone, but because Sly Stallone did the voiceover, and he can only do that kind of voiceover. So maybe they dumbed him down because of that. That's just a weird thing that appeared in my head. James quotes in the chat, says, not monster related, but an anime that I love, Tadaima Okeru. Both partners are male, but one is an omega, whatever that is. I
can talk about that in a moment.
A secondary gender that allows an individual to give birth.
So anyone who doesn't know about the Omegaverse, and I only really know more about it now because I watch Strange Eons on YouTube, and she's done like some really amazing videos about it. So like the Omegaverse is, I think more started off as like fan fiction, and has actually somehow developed to be more mainstream, which is basically like a sort of like another gender in a way, or that allows, or another sex that allows even sort of male individuals, so people, or male people with penises, to be able to give birth. And it sort of ties in a little bit around that sort of, which we know now is sort of like that fake wolf pack sort of instinct. So like alphas, and you have your alpha male and your beta male and your omega and stuff like that. And people can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's generally about like alphas are like, they are and not necessarily all alphas are like cis males with penises. They can be, sort of cis women, but they are like the dominant force. They are the ones who get the I do believe it is the omegas. So the omegas are like the weak people. They are the weak gender. They are the ones who get pregnant, and they give off these pheromones that drive the alphas wild. That makes them want to breed with them. And there's some very interesting sort of stories that have come from that. From what I can remember from Stranger's video, I think it started with Supernatural. I
Yeah,
think
that's
Supernatural started it all.
yeah.
And and not only is it sort of like an interesting thing about sort of like societal dynamics, and a good majority of people who write it are women and femmes. It's a way of exploring not only just sort of like sexuality, but also a really good way to sort of talk about the patriarchy and, sort of like cis male dominance within the world, and exploring that again sort of like in a safe space, where it's not necessarily violent towards women. I don't know if you've got anything else to say about that, Zoe, if you know anything
I
about it.
don't really actually read much like Omegaverse stuff. I was big in the Supernatural fandom until it hurt me, and
Oh
now
no.
me and the Supernatural fandom are not friends anymore because I was a Castiel fan, and I was like, nope,
Last
I don't like that ending. I
last
refuse
episode,
to.
yeah.
Yeah, I refuse. Bye, Supernatural. Go away. I know of the anime. I haven't watched it yet. It's on my
Okay.
ever expanding list of things to watch when the child is asleep, and I actually have 5 minutes to myself. But yeah, I'm aware of the dynamics. It's just it's not a dynamic that I've like got into. I'm kind of more going via like queer horror is where
Yeah.
I'm like my brain and my interests have started going
Mm.
towards.
Mm.
It's interesting how they kind of took basically the Greek alphabet and took the first letter of the Greek alphabet and the last letter of the Greek alphabet, and the last letter weakest.
Yeah.
First
The last.
letter best. Something must work there.
And then you look
Yeah.
at programming and you're like, actually, it's the other way around.
Yeah, very confused. Thanks for the input there, James. We appreciate
Yeah.
it.
So we've got about sort of like 10 minutes left. Is there, I think you've already sort of suggested a few already, Zoe, but is there anything you like, any film or any sort of piece of media that you would really recommend to people are um, who are looking to sort of get more into the genre of sort of monsters seen more in sort of like a positive life or as a representation of queerdom? Is there anything that you would suggest besides from Venom? You've already mentioned Venom.
Yeah, I will
Like
always
Venom,
champion Venom.
all of it.
So there is something I really wanted to champion. It's just it's a bit different. Okay, so but I want people to read it because Netflix have just announced the anime for it, and I'm always a bit hit and miss on whether Netflix will do a good job. Because for every like Castlevania, there's the Dragon's Dogma, and I'm just
Oh.
like, how could you do so well and then go all over something else I like? So I'm a bit like, and also I don't know if it's going to be like CGI'd or beautiful animated, but there is a horror manga called The Summer Hikaru Died, and I've been championing it for about 2 years now, and I'm kind of glad it's getting an anime because I think it'll get more eyes on it. It is something different. It is kind of a combination of folk horror and cosmic horror. But The Summer Hikaru Died is basically it's a tiny little village, nowhere land in like in Japan. And I love these kind of small village horror set ones. It's why Shiki is one of my favorite animes of all time, which is Japan's answer to Salem Lot. But if you don't have a good tolerance for violence, Shiki gets very, very Salem Lot, but anime level violence on it.
Right.
But Summer Hikaru Died is these high school boys, and one day Hikaru dies, and his best friend is like, "Oh my goodness, you died," and Hikaru's like, "Hi," but his best friend is like, "Bird, you dead." Um, and then things in the village slowly start getting like weird. Like the people are slowly starting to go a little bit crazy. The local mystics are a bit like, oh, the things that used to just exist up in the mountains, all the kind of like folk horror tales and weird little like supernatural entities seem to be getting a little bit closer to the village. This is all getting a little bit weird, but at the same time, this entity that's come back that is and isn't Hikaru is kind of like, I know Hikaru died and I was just kind of reborn into his corpse, but I have all his memories, so I remember our entire like lifetime together as best friends and everything, but I'm also not Hikaru. And the two boys are kind of like trying to navigate, right, should you be allowed to live or not? Because you're clearly some bizarre cosmic entity, monstrous. Its other form is there's like people are going mental, but also you still have all the memories of my best friend. And while all of this is going on, the two boys start realizing that they've got feelings for each other. And this Hikaru entity is kind of like learning that it may be in love with his friend, and his friend is like, I think I'm in love with Hikaru, but he doesn't know if he's in love with the memory of his dead friend or this amalgamation. So they're trying to navigate a weird coming out romance story in amongst possession by a cosmic entity while weird supernatural folklore is slowly encroaching on this Japanese village. So it is horror, but it's not like violent horror. It's not like, I mean, there's murder and stuff. It's more like, oh, there's a weird drip on the ceiling that's getting bigger, and was that someone's hair, or why did that just, and like, you know, like creepy, there's something's watching you in the woods and it might be coming closer. It's that kind of like slow burn supernatural horror rather than like everything is violence and murder. So it's subtle, it's beautifully animated, it's animated, beautifully drawn. Lots of heavy, lovely line art. I love heavy line art, and very much like atmosphere that this is middle of nowhere, and these kids are like, I really wish we could go and be in Tokyo and not in the middle of nowhere, but something weird is happening. Plus, I might be gay. I'm not sure what's going on because, like, there's very confusing times for these boys. It's just different. I've not read anything quite like it.
Sounds really cool. Sounds really interesting.
I dropped a link in the Wikipedia for a Wikipedia article, and yes, it's coming summer 2025 to Japan. They think that it's going to be, so they think Q3 for Japan, and they think it will have a worldwide release soon after. That's when the anime is coming, but the books are available now from your regular bookshops. You can probably order them from your comic book shops. Support your indie comic bookshops.
Support them.
Or else.
Reading a comment from Errol. I think Bill Cipher was a high Tumblr sexy man too, and he's a monster triangle. So yeah, I can agree with that. The fact that I mean, Gravity Falls, which is where Bill Cipher, who's the ultimate antagonist in that series. Gravity Falls came out in sort of like 2013, and for those who don't know, it's like a slice of life paranormal cartoon that actually came out on the Disney Channel. But Alex Hirsch, who wrote it, did like such a brilliant job of being able to sort of slip in those sort of adult themes and that sort of cosmic and paranormal horror that made it safe for kids to be able to watch at the same time, but also absolutely hilariously funny. I would highly recommend anyone. You can watch it on Disney Plus. It's brilliant. But I love the fact that it's recently got like a bit of a resurgence. I think there's like a new generation of people who were obviously a lot younger back then when it first came out and didn't know about it, and now sort of like in their like sort of teens, late teens, early 20s, and they're sort of discovering Gravity Falls. And the fact that, again, Bill Cipher, who is basically just a demonic triangle, and people are shipping him with relatively a 70-year-old man, and that's brilliant. I love it so much. And the fact that sort of like a lot of people go quite crazy for this ship, and to the point where the creators also recognize it. And it was J.K. Simmons who did the voice of Stanford, who's the older chap. He went on like a live stream. So like the creators of Gravity Falls, they did like a live stream to raise money for the LA fires, and he came on and he read through comments about his character being in love with a demonic triangle, and was just like, yep, I'll do this is hilarious. So it's the fact that, like, obviously, like a lot of creators who may not have intentionally wanted their demonic triangle to become a bit of a sex symbol, kind of going like, sure, why not? There's an element of that when creating this character. I've made them very intriguing and charming and alluring in some sort of sense. It shouldn't surprise anyone that actually there are quite a lot of people who probably find this character quite attractive, and it doesn't really matter that he's a triangle with one eye and floats around. Like, that's going to happen now. That has happened. We've made it happen.
I think if I can fancy Goo from like Fern Gully, I think like this is the beautiful thing about monsters. It's completely, you can have whatever you want with it. It's for you to just play in that playing field, and most of the time it's all the villains, because they get to be the ones that don't follow the mainstream rules. They get the ones to be flamboyant or different, outside the box, to take on any form or shape they ever want, to be like, no, I don't like these rules of society, this place you've put me in. I'm going to have some fun by doing my own thing. Half the time the villains make way more sense, and it's like, I kind of see your plan there. I kind of like agree with it. My husband's forever telling me that, like, could you stop like being attracted to like half the serial killers and the things you watch? And I'm just like, yeah, but I get why they're doing that. And it's like, stop fancying Doflamingo from One Piece. He committed genocide. Yeah, but he's fabulous. Like, it's just they get to live their authentic selves, and they don't apologize for what they are or who they are. They just get to be, and that's so much more appealing than having to be with like, hey, this is the normal thing that you're allowed to have. And I'm like, I don't want that. I want the weird glowing entity. I want to know what potential is out there beyond human comprehension.
Yeah, I want the weird oozing goose that's going to call me darling. Like, I want
Yeah,
that.
yes, exactly. You know, Cthulhu's going to bring me flowers. Like, come on, that's what I want to think about.
Dark flowers you'll never understand and go mad from seeing, but that's fine.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
It's part of the arrangement.
Yeah.
It's
I'd rather
okay.
go mad than like be stuck in like a really like heteronormative situation where they're like, this is your brown haired, square faced man that will make you stay at home. And I don't know. My life is so not a hetero that I can't really. I'm just like, but I'm just like, I want the thrill of other,
Yeah.
and also be authentically myself as well around like the entity, to be the fact that like I'm gender fluid, and I've got different ideas about like who I am when I'm feeling like a mother, to who I am when I'm feeling like the person that's writing like queer Lovecraftian erotica.
Amazing. With that, we have come to the end of this. So again, so thank you so much, Zoe, for joining us. This has been like a really wonderful chat, especially something near and dear to my heart as well.
Yeah.
So would you like to do any plugs before we finish off? And obviously when this panel goes out, we'll drop them in the description below.
So yes, obviously we have TeratoCon is happening in April in Bristol. That is a one-day monster romance and erotica convention. And in the meantime, have my podcast, The Monster in My Bed.
It would be good to mention that TeratoCon is 18 plus as
Yes,
well.
18 plus convention. I wanted a safe, queer space for people.
Yeah, fantastic. With that note, you'll be able to. Chris is going to share those in the chat, I think.
They were done way back, but I will reshare them.
Thank you. And you can also find Zoe on all of your social beings. Let Zoe spoil you as well, which is the majority of your socials, if that's right, Zoe.
Yep,